January 24th, 1961. A quiet Tuesday night in North Carolina. Farmers sleeping in their beds. And somewhere above them, spinning through the darkness at 8,000 feet, a dime B-52 bomber carrying 2 hydrogen bombs. Each one 260 times more powerful than the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima. When that plane broke apart, both weapons fell toward American soil, and one of them did exactly what it was designed to do in war. Its parachute opened. Its arming sequence began. 7 safety switches engaged. Only one switch stood between eastern North Carolina and complete annihilation. Welcome to Hidden Valor. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where are you watching this video from? It was just after midnight. Major Walter Scott Tulloch had been flying for 11 hours straight. His B-52 Stratofortress was massive, a steel giant carrying a crew of 8 men and 2 Mark 39 thermonuclear weapons. This was Operation Chrome Dome, round-the-clock missions, keeping nuclear-armed bombers in the air at all times. The logic was simple and terrifying. If the Soviets launched a first strike and destroyed America's bombers on the ground, there would be no retaliation, no deterrent. So crews like Tulloch's flew endless circles over American airspace, waiting, ready. The mission had been routine until the refueling. Somewhere over South Carolina, 3 hours earlier, something had gone wrong inside the right wing. Tulloch didn't know it yet, but his plane was dying. When they finally noticed a fuel leak, they were already losing pressure fast. Air traffic control ordered them to hold offshore near Wilmington, burn off fuel, wait for instructions from Boeing. But the leak got worse. Fuel was hemorrhaging from that right wing. At 10,000 feet, during their emergency descent to Seymour Johnson Air Force Base near Goldsboro, the wing failed. Not gradually, catastrophically. The entire structure tore away from the fuselage. What happened next is the stuff of nightmares. The massive bomber didn't just fall. It came apart midair. The fuselage began spinning wildly. And as it spun, centrifugal forces did something no one had anticipated. They pulled on a lanyard in the cockpit. The exact same lanyard a crew member would pull to release nuclear weapons over enemy territory. Tulloch gave the order. Bail out. At 9,000 feet, the crew began ejecting into the freezing January darkness. Lieutenant Adam Maddox did something that had never been done before. He bailed out through the top hatch of a B-52 without an ejection seat. He survived. 5 others made it out alive, but 3 men didn't. Sergeant Francis Roger Barnish, Major Eugene Holcomb Richards, Major Eugene Shelton. They went down with the aircraft, and the bombs fell free. Down below, farmers heard the scream of engines, then an explosion that shook the earth. Walter Gregg later said it nearly knocked him out of bed. He ran to his window and saw his entire field on fire. The wreckage was scattered across 2 square miles of tobacco and cotton farmland. People poured out of their homes. The road to Faro, one of the most deserted parts of Wayne County, suddenly became packed with humanity. But nobody knew about the cargo. Not yet. One bomb, the second weapon, slammed into a muddy field at 700 miles per hour. It broke apart on impact. Pieces of it buried themselves deep in the soft earth. So deep that even after weeks of digging, they couldn't recover everything. The Air Force excavated down to 50 feet. They found most of it, but part of that weapon, the section containing uranium, was never recovered. It's still there, buried in that North Carolina field. The Air Force eventually bought the land, put up a fence. They've tested for radiation over the years. So far, nothing. But that uranium is still down there somewhere in the darkness. The first bomb was different, terrifyingly different. As the plane disintegrated, this weapon went through its release sequence. Its parachute deployed. That 100-foot wide canopy opened above the farmland, and the bomb drifted down almost gently. It got caught in a tree about 500 to 600 yards from where the other bomb hit. When emergency crews arrived, they found it hanging there, intact, and when they examined it, they discovered something that made their blood run cold. 7 out of 8 safety mechanisms had activated. The weapon had charged its firing capacitors. The arming switches had engaged. Everything had happened exactly as designed. The bomb thought it was being dropped on purpose. Because bombs, as one weapons engineer later said, are relatively dumb. They think that if you dropped them out of the bomb bay, you must have intended to do that. Only one switch prevented detonation. A single low-voltage switch that could have failed. That could have been shorted by an electrical jolt. One switch between 3.8 megatons of destruction and the sleeping towns below. The Air Force immediately secured the area. Men with carbines strapped to their shoulders formed perimeter. At least one family was evacuated. Officials told the press there was no danger. The bombs were unarmed, they said. Safety devices had prevented any risk of explosion. That was a lie. For decades, the truth stayed classified. The government insisted that American nuclear weapons had never put civilians at risk through safety flaws. But people had questions. In 1962, physicist Ralph Lapp published a book suggesting the incident had been far more dangerous than admitted. In 1969, Parker Jones, a supervisor at Sandia National Laboratories, the facility responsible for nuclear weapons safety, wrote a classified assessment. He reviewed every detail of the Goldsboro incident. His conclusion was damning. One simple, dynamo technology, low-voltage switch stood between the United States and a major catastrophe. The Mark 39 bombs did not possess adequate safety for airborne alert missions. That final switch could easily have been bypassed. Jones found it credible to imagine conditions under which the weapon could have detonated. Think about what that means. 3.8 megatons. That's 3,800,000 tons of TNT. 260 times the power of the Hiroshima bomb. The fireball alone would have been miles wide. Everything within that radius vaporized instantly. The blast wave would have leveled Goldsboro. The heat would have ignited fires for miles in every direction. But the real horror would have been the fallout. Lethal radiation carried on the wind. Computer models done later showed the plume could have reached Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, as far north as New York City. Millions of people in the path of radioactive death. Not from war, not from an enemy attack, from an accident. In 1983, Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara finally acknowledged part of the truth. He described crashes in North Carolina and Texas where, by the slightest margin of chance, literally the failure of two wires across, nuclear explosions were averted. He admitted that despite their best efforts, the possibility of accidental detonation still existed. The full details didn't emerge until 2013. Investigative journalist Eric Schlosser obtained declassified documents through the Freedom of Information Act, the Sandia Report, the assessment by Parker Jones, all of it confirming what people had suspected for 50 years. America had been one switch away from nuking itself. The accident changed things. President John F. Kennedy, who had been in office for only 3 days when the Goldsboro crash happened, ordered a review of nuclear weapon safety. The intensity of airborne alert missions was reduced. Stronger controls over weapon detonation were developed. Engineers designed better safety mechanisms. The accident with the Goldsboro bombs led to modifications across the entire arsenal. But here's the thing that keeps you up at night. Goldsboro wasn't unique. It wasn't even the worst. Between 1950 and 1980, the U.S. military officially acknowledged 32 broken arrows, 32 accidents involving nuclear weapons. And unofficially, according to declassified documents, there were hundreds more incidents that didn't quite meet the threshold for that designation. Nuclear weapons dropped on Spain, on Greenland, lost off the coast of Georgia, buried in the Pacific Ocean. A wrench dropped into a missile silo in Arkansas that nearly caused a thermonuclear detonation in 1980. Again and again, the machinery of deterrence nearly became the machinery of apocalypse, not because of enemy action, because of human error, mechanical failure, bad luck. The people of Wayne County had no idea. They saw the fires. They heard the explosions. They picked up pieces of wreckage as souvenirs until the Air Force asked them to please return the parts. Some of them probably handled fragments that had been feet away from weapons-grade plutonium and uranium. Walter Gregg watched the whole thing from his bedroom window. His mother thought it was the end times. She was on her knees praying. She had every reason to pray. Because that night, tucked in bed across eastern North Carolina, millions of people had no idea they'd just survived. They never knew that death had fallen from the sky and decided, by the narrowest of margins, to spare them. One switch, one component that held, one safety mechanism that didn't fail when all the others did. Today, there's a historical marker on Route 111 in Eureka, 3 miles north of the crash site. It commemorates the incident under the title Nuclear Mishap, a modest name for the day we almost lost North Carolina. The field where the second bomb hit is privately owned. The uranium is still down there. The Air Force maintains an easement to prevent digging. They don't want anyone disturbing what's buried in that ground. And somewhere in the Sandia National Laboratory's archive, there's a report written by Parker Jones, a warning from 1969 that took 44 years to see daylight. In it, Jones laid out the failures, the vulnerabilities, the luck that saved millions of lives. He ended with a simple truth that applies to every nuclear weapon ever built. When you put enough power in a machine to destroy cities, you're always one failure away from catastrophe. Goldsboro proved it. One switch. That's all we had. That's all that stood between an ordinary January night and the end of everything. The terrifying truth is that for decades during the Cold War, we were living on borrowed time. Accidents like Goldsboro weren't aberrations. They were inevitable. When you fly armed nuclear weapons 24 hours a day, when you keep thousands of warheads on hair-trigger alert, when you build weapons so powerful they can end civilization, eventually something goes wrong. We got lucky in 1961. We got lucky in 1966 in Spain, in 1968 in Greenland, in 1980 in Arkansas. But luck runs out, and the next time, we might not have that one switch that holds, that one safety mechanism that works when all the others fail. That's the legacy of Goldsboro. Not just what almost happened, but what could still happen, because those weapons still exist, and machines still fail. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to Hidden Valor for more.